Ladies and gentlemen, a very good morning and welcome to the DGAP morning briefing. I'm Henning Hoff, Executive Editor of Internationale Politik Quarterly. The re-election of Donald Trump as US President last week continues to reverberate around the world, not least in Europe, which is faced with Russia's brutal war of aggression against Ukraine, which will soon enter day 1000. This makes Europe's situation especially precarious. Add to that the implosion of the German government only hours after Trump's victory. Now, a US president is about to return to the White House, who, during his first term in office, showed little regard for allies and reportedly questioned America's continued participation in NATO. During the campaign, he openly said that he would not honor NATO's Article 5, the collective defense clause, were Russia to attack member countries that spend less than 2% of GDP on defense. According to NATO estimates, there are still 8 such countries left. I won't name names. With Germany, thanks to the Sondervermögen or special fund, is hitting 2.12% this year. Hardly reassuring. Meanwhile, Trump's national security team is shaping up with some appointments, Rubio, Waltz, perhaps causing fewer concerns than others, Lighthizer, Hegseth, and Gabbard. Of course, the Trump-shaped shadow that is now hanging over Europe touches upon a great number of other fields: China policy, energy, trade, investment, climate, and many more. And there is also the ill will Trump uses to show vis-à-vis the European Union as an institution. Trump probably, or definitely, is the first US president who is basically opposed to European integration as such. To discuss all this, I have the pleasure of welcoming 3 experts this morning. In order of appearance, we'll first be hearing from my DGAP colleague, Dr. Stefan Meister, who leads the Center for Order and Governance in Eastern Europe, Russia, and Central Asia, here at the German Council on Foreign Relations. This morning, Stefan will speak to the implications of Trump's victory for Germany and its role in Europe, especially when it comes to Russia's war against Ukraine. Good morning, Stefan.
Good morning.
Also with us is Sylvie Kauffmann, editorial director and columnist of Le Monde newspaper. Sylvie is a widely published international affairs commentator and author of a recent book, Les Aveugles, about German and French blindness vis-à-vis Vladimir Putin's Russia. This morning, she will talk about how France is reacting to the incoming Trump administration. A warm welcome, Sylvie.
Good morning. I hope you can hear me.
And your sound is now excellent. Thank you very much. And last but certainly not least, we will be hearing from Josef, Senior Associate Fellow here at the German Council on Foreign Relations, one of Germany's most renowned Europe experts. Josef was the DGAP's Mercator Fellow in 2013 to 14, and then went on to head the European Council on Foreign Relations Berlin office until 2019. Earlier, he served as at the European Policy Center's Director of Studies in Brussels, and from 2001 to 2010, led the international policy work of the Bertelsmann Foundation. This morning, Josef will share his views on the Trump impact on the European Union and the future of the transatlantic relationship. Warm welcome, Josef.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Some quick housekeeping remarks. To start us off, each panelist will present their about 5-minute input. After some discussion on the panel, after roughly 30 minutes, we will be opening up for your questions and comments. For the Q&A, please raise your hand, introduce yourself, and put your question to the panel. You're also welcome to submit questions and comments via the chat function. Please note that the briefing will be recorded and that we'll have to close on time at 9:30 a.m. And with a lot of thanks to my DGAP colleagues, Jan Stöckmann, Milan Nitsch, Julia Lueva, Wiebke Evering, Helga Beck, and many more, I open the session, and let's start with Stefan, please.
Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me again. I hope I will not repeat too much what I already talked about last week. I just shared an article which I published with IPQ with Henning Hoff's publication. Thank you, Henning, for being so quick also and making this possible. And it's exactly about the topic I want to discuss now, what this war means, what the election of Trump means for Ukraine, but also a new German government, or the end of the current traffic light coalition, I don't want to speculate here also too much. I just want to start with some key elements, very short before I'm going into Ukraine. Some key elements of how I see the further trends in the international order, which will be further fooled or accelerated by Donald Trump. I think what we see is the first point is the end of the multilateral order, functioning international institutions like UN and OSCE, and Donald Trump as a president will further erode the international multilateral cooperation, since he will work transactional and as a deal maker. I think this is how we know him also from his first presidency. The consequence is the strengthening of the role of the strong, those who are willing and able to use force and to bargain, who have the military capabilities, will play a bigger role in the regional and also in the global politics. That does not mean that smaller states will be weakened, or it's only the ability of the big countries to negotiate. And we have examples here with Hungary's Viktor Orban, who is very successful also negotiating his interests, but also with Benjamin Netanyahu in Israel, who is pushing the US further with his approach. But I think it's more about, it strengthens also those who are ideological, closer to Trump, and have also access to him. So I think this personal relationship is very important, and also this ideological closeness with Trump. And I think for me, it's again about, and this is the main thing, the willingness and the ability to act exactly what we have not seen with the current chancellery in Germany and the outgoing traffic light coalition. So there is the inability to act, the inability to lead, and the inability to make decisions. And that's why Germany's role in Europe and in the world is diminishing. I think this is a key element for me. Second point is Trump will strengthen authoritarian leadership. He likes authoritarian men, and this will play in the hand of Putin and Kim. He speaks rather their language than the language of most of the European politicians. But he will be much more willing to punish China and Iran. So we will have more conflicts with China and Iran. He's much more confrontational. And in my opinion, this will rather strengthen Putin and Russia's role to increase cooperation with China and Iran. And both are strong enablers of the Russian military industry in this war. They are both crucial for Russia, because Russia has not the capacities to produce enough weapons and ammunition, and it now even outsources also fighting to North Korean fighters. And the third point is that institutions like BRICS and Shanghai Organization will play a bigger role in regional and global politics as a meeting point of authoritarian leaders, which coordinate specific policies, especially in the financial sector, but also in other sectors. So what all this mean for Ukraine and European security? Ukraine will have to make painful concessions since Trump wants a deal with Putin and end this war as soon as possible. Not in 24 hours, but I think he will push for ending this war. He and his advisors, Trump and his advisors made clear that both sides will have to make concessions. But that means, first of all, with what I described before, with the power of the strong, that Ukraine will have to give up territories. So Ukraine will have to make, first of all, concessions, including Crimea, since it is in a weaker position and completely dependent on Western and, first of all, US support. And Putin can put Ukraine via Trump even under pressure, I would argue. Putin does not see any value to talk with Scholz or Macron about ending the war in Ukraine, because it's only about the US president. He's the powerful person from a Moscow perspective, and there will be limited coordination with Europe on this from the US side. And for the German chancellor, the direct link with Washington since this war started is now over. Yeah, and I think we will have to see more European coordination also on this war. And we will also see a US administration which will much less coordinate with the Europeans, but will rather directly talk with, for instance, President Putin about how to end the war. On the battlefield, Putin is using the period until Trump is in charge in January to take as much as territory as possible at any costs. And I think the North Korean soldiers helped just in Kursk helped to push more on the Donbas front. He puts more missiles, drones, also from Iran and North Korea, on Ukrainian cities to improve his bargaining position, and maybe also push as much as migrants to Europe, to put also European policy under pressure. Migration is the main issue also of European politics. And I think we have to understand this is not anymore a war of attrition, as we discussed it in the past month, but we see now really an advantage of Russia in terms of manpower, in terms of weapons. We see that Ukraine has not mobilized enough troops to defend the whole line of contact line. It has more ammunition and weapons, but I think manpower is a crucial problem now of Ukraine, and we will see more breakthroughs of Russia on the front line. In a discussion at Valdai Club last week, Putin started to please Trump, called him a great man, and offered negotiations. Immediately afterwards, the Kremlin administration made clear what are the conditions, or that the conditions have not changed. So Putin, Russia wants the recognition of Donetsk, Luhansk, Zaporizhia, and Kherson regions as Russian territories. And some of these regions are still not completely under Russian control. So he wants even more territory than Russia controls at the moment. I think Trump already, or people around Trump already said that Crimea is lost, but we also understand Crimea is crucial to attack Ukraine. So it's crucial also strategically to control the Black Sea region. So it's also in terms of European security, not in our interest that Russia controls Crimea. And if this is just given as a bargaining chip, I think it's highly problematic for European security. Coming to the German collapse of the German government and snap election, I think the election will take place exactly in the period of the inauguration of Trump. Germany is the biggest European supporter of Ukraine. It will not have a budget soon. There will be no orders for new weapons and ammunition because we have no budget. Even in the current budget, in the draft budget, there is not much money for Ukraine. So we will have again a gap also of weapon supply for Ukraine. I think this is the second bad news, or this is another bad news for Zelensky.
So you're running out of time, I'm afraid.
I'm just ending here. So I think, again, it's really the question about European leadership. It's again about the ability to act. This is also how I started. And I think Germany has here a crucial role. And I think the new government needs to play a different role on all this. It's also about strengthening negotiation formats, playing a role here. And then also having the budget to buy US weapons, to buy weapons also, and to support Ukraine to get in a bargaining position, that we get an agreement which is in a way sustainable. And really to be a player here also in these negotiations. So I just end here. Sorry for being too long.
No problem. Thank you very much, Stefan. Let's move on quickly on to Paris and to Sylvie Kauffmann.
Yeah, thank you very much. Good morning to all of you. Well, talking about European reactions, I think it's interesting to look at the messages of congratulations from European leaders on Donald Trump's victory. And it is quite revealing to see who reacted first and how quick. So, of course, you had Orban, who was the first, Viktor Orban, with this greatest comeback of the American political history. The second one to congratulate Trump was the Austrian chancellor, which also makes sense. And the third one was Emmanuel Macron, just a few minutes later. So, and of course, Olaf Scholz's message came much later. He was among the last ones among the Europeans. So it is clear that Macron, who has been completely absent from the domestic political scene in France since he had to appoint Michel Barnier as prime minister as a result of the disastrous summer election. So it is clear that Macron sees this new transatlantic challenge as an opportunity to be active again on the international scene and to push his agenda of European sovereignty. So what he did first on the day after when Trump's election was announced was to call Chancellor Scholz to stick to the Franco-German tradition, at least formally. And then he put a message on Twitter X calling to work for a more united, more sovereign and stronger Europe. And then in Budapest at the European political conference, the EPC summit last week, he made a long statement. Macron again, coming back to this idea of herbivores and carnivores, and since then the message coming from government officials in Paris has been, this is now we have to take our destiny in our hands. We have to work as Europeans. We need to act as Europeans. So the idea in Paris, I think, is to show that the original agenda of Macron's first term, the Sorbonne agenda of 2017, is even more appropriate in today's situation, with Trump's return to the White House in a stronger position than 2016. And of course, the big difference with 2016 is that the world is a much more dangerous one, and that we have a big war raging in the heart of Europe. So the bet in Paris is that the shock of Trump's victory and the extent of Trump's victory will provoke a strategic awakening of Europe. The big issue, of course, is Ukraine, as Stefan described. And the big issue for the French is that a settlement of the Ukrainian crisis may happen between Russia and the US without the Europeans. And that is what Macron addressed 2 days ago when Mark Rutte, the NATO General Secretary, came to Paris on Tuesday. They made a joint statement. I mean, they addressed the press together, and Macron said it must be very clear: nothing about Ukraine without Ukrainians, nothing about Europe without Europeans, because it is very clear in Paris that a settlement of Ukraine is not only about Ukraine, it's about the future of security, of the European security. So this is really the biggest issue, I think, now. The problem in Paris, the problem is, of course, that Macron is much weaker than in 2017, and he has lost a lot of credibility among his peers in Europe. And so this is where a new player, if I may say, comes in, which is Poland. And this is why it's going to be very interesting to watch how this realignment, I think we're already seeing a realignment in Europe. So it will be interesting to watch how this realignment emerging is going to play. A reminder that Poland has this big increased defense budget, so it is very important from an American point of view, and of course they are buying a lot of American equipment. And also Poland will hold the rotating presidency of the EU as of January 1st. So in Budapest, Macron and Donald Tusk held a bilateral meeting, because after talking to Scholz, after the Trump's victory was announced, Macron talked also to Tusk. And so in Budapest, they agreed to have a bilateral in Budapest. They held a bilateral meeting for almost an hour, the two of them. And then Tusk took the lead in front of the media on Saturday, I think, proposing to coordinate actively, and I quote him, coordinate actively with countries that share our views on the geopolitical and transatlantic situation, as well as on Ukraine. So he has in mind France, the UK, the Baltic countries, and the Nordic countries. Of course, the fact that Germany was not included didn't go unnoticed. I guess there are also some, of course, there's the German political situation, but I think there are also some personal domestic political factors on Tusk's side. So now you hear in Paris of Franco-Polish convergence, which is very important, I'm told, for European security, this convergence. And so we will see how close and how far this France and Poland, how far France and Poland can go together in carrying this agenda of European strategic awakening, as it is described here. But from the French point of view, it's a continuation of Macron's agenda on European sovereignty. And I end here with also the Bratislava agenda, because in 2023, Macron had this speech at GlobSec meeting where he, atoned for the French past ignorance of Central and Eastern Europe, and there has been quite an active rapprochement since then, and France thinks that trust has been rebuilt and that now they can go ahead together in this new situation. And I will leave it there.
Thank you very much, Sylvie. Very interesting. Let's move on quickly to Josef Janning with his remarks on sort of the EU as a whole. Josef, please.
Thanks very much, Henning. Also, thanks to the other two speakers. Very interesting and already takes a lot out of my mouth. So I'll try to be focused on the point that the Trump administration hasn't started yet. And when it starts, much of what we've been discussing, or much of what, for example, Macron and Tusk have been discussing, will look very differently. Because this administration, I suggest to you, will start on one principal assumption when it comes to Europe, that the days in which the Europeans took advantage of the United States in security terms and economic terms are over or need to end. And this administration will take it as one of its primary goals is to rebalance that relationship to the advantage of the United States. And of course, Trump is on the record numerous times to say that the Europeans take unfair advantage of the US security guarantee. And in his view, it is not just about achieving the 2% target of NATO. Trump will come into office and suggest that 2% is far too conservative. If we are serious, then Europe should be spending as much as the United States spent. And secondly, Trump still has this idea that the 2% is not sort of national investments into security, but should be contributions to the United States. And he will think of more precise issues this time, in which the Europeans can compensate the United States. For example, Poland now pays a certain share of the deployment costs of US forces deployed in Poland. Why not pay 100%? No? Poland now buys plenty of weapons, as has been said, from the United States. Why not buy all of it from the United States? This is the kind of rhetoric and the kind of logic that we will see applied. And that will be a rather tough game for NATO member states to deal with. Secondly, the Trump administration is determined to end the exploitation of the United States by Europeans in economic terms. The tariff issue has been a prominent issue in his election campaign, and he will stick to it because he believes it. Tariffs for a transactionalist are a wonderful instrument because you can apply them ad libitum, you can exempt certain actors, or you can ease the tariff load on them and shift the load onto others. So it's a fabulous instrument. Actually, when you look at what Sylvie and Stefan has said, the Trump administration has three levers by which to rebalance that relationship with Europe. And the first one is Russia, obviously. The US will press both sides to end the war. And the Ukrainians have little alternative, as Stefan has rightly said. And the Russians have a couple of incentives to give in to Trump because the way in which this conflict will end will deeply divide Europe. Because it will once again show that the big words about Ukraine is defending our freedom and our democracy are just that, are just words. And there will be those after this war has ended that feel even more threatened than before and feel even less reassured by the alliance which they are a member of, or by the United States. But they will be in a perfect dilemma because they know they depend on the United States, even though the United States is sort of destroying the milieu that they also have been building. And I think this goes for Poland, and in a special way, it also goes for the Baltic states. But since Poland was mentioned as part of an axis between Paris and Warsaw, I think this axis won't go very far because Macron has only words to offer. And Polish security concerns will lead them to the conclusion that, like it or not, they depend on Washington and essentially have to do what Trump wants. The second lever is trade, as I've mentioned earlier, and we will see that Trump uses the tariff weapon on Europe rather quickly. And again, it will be divisive because the tariff that he's going to introduce will hit a couple or a few countries much more than others. And among these few are Germany, Italy, and Ireland, because their relative share of US trade to their total foreign trade is highest. And again, we will see that some Europeans will sort of take a quiet role because they are not so much affected, and other Europeans will ask for strong countermeasures, including the sovereignist Macron. Will ask for strong countermeasures, and then the Trump administration will start its divide et impera game and tell the Scandinavians or tell the Poles, tell the Baltics, and a couple of others to say, if you want to deal with us on security issues, we expect you not to support the automatism by which the European Commission is entitled to draft those counter-tariff measures, and vote against it on any occasion that may be possible, and use the means available to stop the European Union from doing this. And of course, the third one is China, because containing China's rise is the #1 strategic priority of the United States, which, by the way, is the only thing that saves Taiwan, because while the Trump administration is not inclined to fight any wars, they are totally determined to use the Taiwan question as one of those pressure instruments they would want to use on Beijing. And we will see that the American administration, in its mercantilist war with China, will want Europe to take very clear side with the United States. And of course, the Chinese will ask the same from the Europeans. And again, this will weaken Europe, it will divide Europe, and will make it easier for both the Americans and the Chinese to play with the Europeans. Now, there you have it. This is what I think is in store. A mercantilist, a nationalist, and in part an isolationist Trump administration will rather enhance or increase or strengthen the centrifugal tendencies that we see in Europe today. All the calls that we hear about now Europe needs to stand together, I think it's just words. This is a time now faced with the sort of geopolitical environment that Stefan has described at the outset. It's about action. It's about what you are ready and able and willing to do, and not what you're saying. Because what you're saying is just that, is just words. And this will be the litmus test for Europe. Are European countries willing to take initiative and lead? And on that question, I don't see any countries. I see countries and I see leaders who would like to, like Emmanuel Macron. But Macron, unfortunately, lacks determined and capable partners to sort of act on his desire. And I think the best thing that the next German government can hope for is that the Ukraine war is over before it even comes into office. So it will not have to address the dilemma of what do we do? Do we try to find resources to support Ukraine further, even though the Americans are not doing that? Or do we give in to the geopolitical realities and say, well, if Washington doesn't want to continue this, we can't do this on our own? And I think the best thing is that Matt's is hoping for is now that he will not have to answer that question because it has been answered in the meantime. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Josef. Strong points, very well put. Thank you very much. We're already past the 30 minutes line, so I would like to get our audience in also. So have your questions ready. Please raise your hands. It's always nicer if you put a question in person to the panel rather than writing something in the chat. But while you do that, I would like to go back to Sylvie with some points Josef just made. Especially on Macron. He has only words to offer. Is that also your view? I mean, the fact that he was one of the first to congratulate Trump, isn't there something also an element of a special relationship he tries to establish again? He was one of the leaders of Europe, sort of trying to build a personal relationship with Trump in the first term, had him over for a state visit and so on. Your reaction to what we just heard from Josef?
Yeah, no, I totally agree with the fact that he has only words so far because the fiscal situation of France is absolutely terrible. I don't have to describe it in details, but the debt is abysmal, and so there's no money basically. So but words for Macron are important. The problem also is, as I said, that he's lost a lot of credit among his European partners and global partners also since last summer. So of course he has a point about what is at stake here today. Yeah, his relationship with Trump. He mentioned that also in his message of congratulation, that he worked with him well in the first term of Trump. The relationship was seen as a failure in a way because you remember he went to Washington, tried to charm Trump, tried to establish a very personal relationship, rapport with him, and it didn't work because Trump treated him as a little boy, in fact. But and he failed, and Macron failed in his main objective, which was to convince Trump not to give up on the JCPOA, on the Iranian nuclear deal, and he failed, and also on the Paris Agreement on climate. So in that way, he failed, but he managed to have a constant dialogue with Trump. He could call him on the phone. And on one issue, which is maybe not a very good example because it ended up eventually in total failure, but on one issue, they did cooperate well. It was on Africa and on the anti-terrorist fight in the Sahel. So, there's probably hope that he may be able to talk again to Trump, but I don't think that will be very. I don't think it will work as in the first term because first you have Orban, you have Meloni, you have other players, and then as we said, there is the economic weight of France at the moment is really is not good. So, but I think the concern about Ukraine, I totally agree with Josef that this is the way this crisis is going to be negotiated or the way it will end can divide Europe. I even think it can break up Europe from my own point of view. So I think there's really an awareness in Paris that this is what is at stake.
Yes, and the one question also is it the nuclear one? Macron has sort of seemingly offered to have a discussion about sort of possibly Europeanizing the French deterrent. Is that something that's also being discussed?
Yeah, but I think this cannot go very far as long as there's no German government, no new German government. It's going to. It's interesting because the Munich Security Conference will be held without I guess without a German chancellor, a new German chancellor. Yeah, it will be just a couple of weeks before your election. So, and that's where Macron 2 or 3 years ago, I forgot, reinitiated this discussion, tried to reinitiate this discussion about nuclear weapons. So I don't know what can. Just one thing about the next German government. I think there's hope that if the CDU comes back, it will be good for the Franco-German relationship because this relationship is completely dead. I mean, dead. I mean, it has the engine is dead. Let's say the relationship is not dead, of course, but there was this op-ed by Friedrich Merz, which was we published in Le Monde last week or 10 days ago, saying, you know, trying to give more impetus in the European project and in the Franco-German relationship. And there's this feeling in Paris also that it's easier to work on the Franco-German relationship with CDU than with SPD. I don't know if it's true, but yeah.
Thank you very much. Since there are no questions, let's go to Stefan. Also, maybe your reaction to what Josef has developed, this sort of huge potential for the Trump administration to split Europe in so many ways. I remember that during the first administration, then German Foreign Minister Heiko Maas sort of had this slogan saying that the answer to Trump is more Europe, or I think the whole phrase goes sort of America first, Europe united. I think these are two phrases that were used at the time. Do you see this as a shock that might sort of unite Europe, or do you see the stronger power sort of pulling it apart?
I also want to react to some maybe 2 or 3 other points. So I'm not a specialist on European policy, but I think what we are seeing, and this is also what Josef is saying, who should cooperate with whom? So where is leadership on Europe also to unite Europe on different issues and maybe also resist on some of the policies from the US side? And who will then really further take ownership on this? Yeah, Macron, I think nobody takes any more serious in a way because he had great speeches, but he's not really able to supply, but he also has no partners. I think that's also true. The question is how this new German government will function and maybe will be able to lead anything. I think the hopes are at the moment mainly that it's just more functional, yeah. So it's more able to just get things done, yeah. But I think there's so much to do in terms of domestic politics and also redefining Germany's role in Europe and in the world. It's about the business model, the economic model of Germany, how to deal with China. Yeah, so and I think this will absorb also this incoming government, which will be also a coalition, very likely with the Social Democrats. We will have a Social Democratic foreign minister, likely, maybe even with the Greens, because they don't have enough votes. So I think we will have to see how this will work. Yeah, so. And I think this is the problem. I think who should cooperate with whom? We see this Polish initiative now on security policy. I think that's maybe something which we will see more, that, let's say, middle-sized countries in Europe will more cooperate with each other. But as long as they don't have the support of the bigger member states, they just have limited capacities also. So we will see. We had a discussion about the Weimar Triangle being maybe more like a format which will lead on certain issues, but also the German-Polish relation have become very problematic with how Scholz managed the reparation issue, yeah, on World War II. I think it was very badly managed by the Chancellery, alienated also Tusk, who is not a Tusk of 10 years or 15 years ago. It's not the Poland of 15 years ago. It's a very different country now. And I think this is also the problem. We also have to adapt our own perceptions of how other countries in Europe are moving forward, and we are not. Yeah. So let me just add one more thing, also from an Ukrainian perspective, just to bring this in. I think from Ukrainian side, as I discuss it also with Ukrainian colleagues, they are rather optimistic now. They are happy that Biden ends. For them, the model of Biden and Scholz in dealing with this war failed. So I think they have hopes that they maybe have a transactional relationship with Trump, who makes decisions which help them then maybe also to attack also on Russian territory, certain military infrastructure. So I think there are more hopes in Ukraine now that there is a different kind of policy which helps also Ukraine to get in a better bargaining position. And for them, really, this model which is now outgoing failed. I think we also have to admit this.
Thank you very much, Stefan. There's one first question in the chat, which I then put to Josef. What about the UK's role in all this? And I would, since no one else sort of pushed back, I'll try a little. Isn't there some linkage, though, between these areas where you said there are levers the incoming Trump administration can pull? And one is maybe China, and don't you see some sort of room of maneuver for the Europeans to bargain over this alignment on China, making deals like, well, if you sort of don't impose tariffs, we might sort of be more open to your wishes when it comes to China alignment. Is this a kind of plausible or realistic way for the Europeans to approach the Trump administration?
Okay, good question. First, to the role of the UK. I think the UK, of course, could have a role, and I think it also should have a role, but I'm not sure what it is, because the UK is not, by its own decision, a central player in that struggle between European institutions and the Trump administration, because they have opted out of that. So they could take sides with the US, which wouldn't help them. They could take sides with the Europeans, which doesn't help the Europeans that much. So, I'm not sure what it's going to be. Of course, in all the hectic debates that I expect to emerge among NATO members, the UK role could probably be very constructive by trying to take some of the heat out of that debate, some of the anxieties and fears out of that debate. I don't know how far that can go, but I think that still would be a very useful one. Regarding China, I have my doubts, because Trump has chosen to approach the issue of China's rise to the #1 position in global power with strength. Whereas the Europeans already are in the defensive. When we look at China, particularly from a German point of view, it is now rather with fears of being sort of pushed aside by the Chinese momentum in, for example, the key industry of Germany, which is the automobile industry. It is happening right in front of our eyes, and there's not anything that political leaders seem to be able to do about it. And the Trump factor will make it worse, because Trump will put demands on the Europeans, which they would like to avoid. The European strategy so far regarding China and regarding this whole crisis of multilateral trade has been to wait and see, to not rock the boat, to sort of keep it down, let the Commission do some negotiations and see how far they can get some concessions from the Chinese, but not by European leaders speaking strongly with the Chinese. They don't do that. Also, they are not united in this. And I think that's the problem for Europe. Stefan has said it. Sylvie has implicitly also said it. We are lacking the resources for leadership, and that leadership is sort of the prerequisite for action. And in my view, in this world of strongmen and power-sensitive players, it is the readiness for action that counts. And that's where Europe is extremely weak. And that's where I think the Trump administration has every interest in keeping Europe weak. This is not an administration that wants to see a strong, coherent Europe. And so I think in Washington, nobody really puts any serious thoughts into the nuclear deterrence issue from the French side, because it will only make sense if the Europeans were actually about to create a joint defense vis-à-vis Russia, for example, which they are not. No, they cooperate in their defense efforts, but they are not building a joint defense. And as long as there is no integration of defense forces, a Europeanization of the French nuclear deterrent can only consist in co-funding France's nuclear efforts without changing anything in terms of the mission and command structure of these weapons.
Thank you very much. Since there are no other questions, I go on just to sort of do the discussion on the panel. Sylvie, do we have any idea what Macron means, or what kind of thing he has in mind when he says he wants to make sure that the Europeans will be sitting on the table when European security is discussed? What is he banking on to achieve this?
No, I don't know what leverage he has in mind. But I think this is where he would like to have unity, and I think the Poles also have this concern. But this has been looming even with the Biden administration. There was, you could see when Jake Sullivan or we're talking about a possible settlement or negotiations, the Europeans were not supposed to sit at the negotiating table. And I don't think with Kamala Harris they would have been included. Remember when Kamala Harris was asked during the campaign whether she would negotiate with Putin about Ukraine, and she said, I will not negotiate directly only with Putin without the Ukrainians. The Ukrainians will have to be at the table. She never mentioned the Europeans. And so this has been a concern for a long time in Paris, that having in mind that any settlement on Ukraine has very strong implications for the future of the security of Europe, because this is how how Putin's power emerges from that settlement. Of course, will have huge consequences for Europe and for the security of Europe. So that was always this concern that the future of the security of Europe cannot be decided over the heads of the Europeans. This is the French I think are very strongly minded about this. I'm not sure this is shared by all Europeans, but this is a constant concern here. Now, this is already looking maybe too far for the moment, because we are now with this urgency of the Ukrainian situation. We also have, we haven't mentioned it yet, but or maybe Stefan has, I forgot, but the North Korean factor also. I think this is what Tony Blinken mentioned in Brussels yesterday. It is really something which makes the whole situation much more serious. So now there is this talking in Paris and Brussels now that there may be an initiative from the Biden administration before they leave office about Ukraine, that they will provide more. So I don't know whether it will be more equipment or maybe some change in the position about strikes on the Russian territory. But there's something which is being prepared, and something that the Biden administration could decide to reinforce Ukraine before the Trump administration comes into office, and something that the Trump administration wouldn't be able to undo as soon as they arrive. But I don't have details about this.
Thank you very much. And before we come to a final round, sort of, and to hope to end of a slightly more sort of optimistic or positive note, maybe all the panelists could think of the one thing Europe could do, should do. What would be the one step which you would recommend the Europeans to take? I want to quickly go to Stefan with this scenario Josef Henning has made sort of that there might be sort of a ceasefire, some sort of negotiated solution already ready when the next German government comes in. Is that realistic in your view?
I don't know if they really have already a plan what they want to do, but I think what is discussed is to freeze the war on the contact line. When they are then in the situation of negotiations, and then arm also Ukraine in a way that it can defend itself much more. I guess Europeans should pay for arming Ukraine. And then another thing which is discussed, that European troops or actors will protect or will protect this kind of contact line. Yeah. So if I'm thinking about all the details of this very broad discussion, I'm very skeptical about the implementation and the willingness to send any kind of troops into this contact line from the European side. If I'm looking into our budgets, I'm not so sure what we are able also to pay for, to arm Ukraine. I think also what is possible to produce. So I really have my doubts how this should function. And as I said also before, I think for Putin at the moment, there is really a different situation. So he really has done his homework in terms of increasing capacities also of his army by paying more money for mobilization without being a big mobilization, bringing in North Koreans. I think they now testing also what they can do with the North Koreans, and maybe they can even outsource more of this to have more troops. And then also have the military equipment, which they cannot produce by themselves from Iran and North Korea. So it does not mean that Russia has not a lot of problems. And there's also internally, there are some issues with migrants, with violence in the society. There are issues with the sanctions, which make a lot of things more problematic. But I think it's also the perception now by other countries like China, Middle Eastern countries, other Asian countries who increasingly think Russia can win this war. And also are more careful, also maybe putting Russia under pressure, maybe also supplying more. China is supplying much more in terms also of what the military industry needs. So I think they have more and more the impression, this is also what I have from talks I just was also in Central Asia and the Middle East, that there is an increasing impression that the West is not able to help Ukraine. So and I think that will help also Putin's story that he can win this war. So I think, and that's also part of shifting the balance and the support here. So again, Putin's aim is to get Kiev under control. It's not about, I think I just repeat something what we're discussing since quite a long time, but I think we have to be clear here also, and if we look into the domestic German debate, it's not about Donbass, it's about Ukraine, it's about Kiev, it's about puppet regime or even, this is now more and more discussed, just destroying Ukraine as a country, dividing the country, cutting off some parts, and also the whole discussion about the German solution from the Cold War does not work with in this case, because what Russia wants is to integrate this territory into Russia, not to keep it as a separate state, in a way. So I think everything they gain, they will integrate and they will change. So I think we have here a very different situation. So it's about, if not controlling, then destroying the Ukrainian state. And this is not only bad for Ukraine, but also for European security and the spheres of influence in Europe. And that's why I'm very skeptical about this ideas just to end the war with a new contact line, because then Russia will just attack again on one point.
Yeah, also I have seen it said that the big difference between Cold War Germany, divided Cold War Germany, and the situation in Ukraine is that for Russia, Ukraine is Russia. And that is a big difference. Let's now have a final round, starting with Josef. Henning, and please 1 minute answers. What is the one thing you would advise European policymakers, the EU, Europe, whoever you would address your piece of advice to, would be one sort of constructive thing to deal with this new situation? Josef, please.
Not easy to say. I think the only constructive thing that I can think of is don't give up. Don't lose the hope that you can make it, because this is also a period that needs to be sustained. The administration after the Trump administration may not be much better than the Trump administration, may not even reverse that policy. But if Europe survives the next 4 years as a halfway coherent actor, it has a chance. But it will get worse. We will see the same trends in society that have shaped the US campaign this time and before. We will see them grow in Europe. Expect more nationalism, expect more mercantilism, more also absentism when it comes to international affairs. And that will be some hard stuff for traditional European policymakers to swallow.
Thank you very much. Sylvie.
Yes, just quickly on what Stefan said, this is the biggest challenge on Ukraine will be what security guarantees. And that's where the Europeans will also have to come into play. What security guarantees can we offer also for our own security? The thing, I think the constructive proposal I have is the Draghi report. Accept the Draghi report to make Europe stronger. And I know this is very difficult to say in Germany, but one of the main conclusions of the Draghi report is we have to borrow, to build a common European debt to finance this reinforcement of Europe on the global scene. And I think there is no other way to solve this issue.
Thank you very much. And Stefan, final word.
I think the main problem, or one of the main problems I see, is that we try with the old instruments and the old mindset to solve issues which are just further moving and have already changed fundamentally. And I think for me, it's really to recognize this reality and the needs also to invest, to create also, or to develop instruments to become a player on security, on other issues, I think, and also shift the debates on this. You need really to communicate also this new reality and not give the impression that things can just go on like they are. I think that's a crucial thing for me. It's really a mental strategic mindset change, which we need in this country, but also in Europe. It's not only a German problem, but it's a particular German problem. And this goes to all the sectors we are discussing, including also the economy. I think this is for me really crucial.
Thank you. And on that, I bring this DGAP morning briefing to a close. Thank you for attending this morning. Thank you, our panelists, Josef, Henning, Sylvie, Kauffmann, Stefan, Meister, for your input and for a really lively discussion, I think. The next Thursday, there will be no DGAP morning briefing because the following Monday, November the 25th, there will be a special morning briefing on the outcomes of the COP29, I believe, climate summit. So hope to see you there again. And I'm wishing you all a good week and a very good morning. See you soon at the German Council on Foreign Relations. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.